just a little bit about me. I don't think you know a lot about anything that happened before I got to UF, but
Yeah.
um, when I was at UF, became a different person and was just growing in a different way. But before that, I grew up on free lunch. I didn't really, everyone would come back from summer and say, "What did you do?" And people were talking about going on cruises and going to the Bahamas or Mexico. And I'm sitting here like, I played in the park a lot. We went to the beach a lot, and really kind of that's when it struck me that I was living life a little bit differently when I was younger.
Hmm.
And everyone around me, hardworking, blue collar jobs. And my mom always told me, work with your hand or work with your head so you don't have to work with your hands. And that kind of stuck. That was a good lesson there. So got to high school and dove into the AP classes, the ACE classes, debate club, did really well there. Got into UF somehow. I don't think the person I was in 2011 that got into UF would get in now. It's getting a lot tougher.
I feel like
Um,
they say it every year. But but you and me both got lucky to do that. But I want to pause and still rewind a little bit. So I want to reflect. There was a good quote that you said there. I think your mom said it. It was like work with your head so you don't have to work with your hands. And also uh, you mentioned really when you noticed that there was like a difference in life when you were talking like again talking about your summer experiences growing up. And so, how old were you when that was going on? Like, tell me more about that.
yeah, it had to have been like the fifth grade. We got in, and the assignment was something along the lines of tell us about your summer. And everyone just had a whole bunch of different exciting things they did. And I remember I was like, well, I rode my bike a lot. I
Hmm.
went to the park, played pickup games of basketball and football, and that's when I was just kind of like, all right, something's different here.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so yeah, and then you got into UF obviously. So go Gators for everybody who,
Go Gators.
I think I have it right over here. Some football. I don't know what did you, when you're applying to school, like first off, college in general, right? What was that like? As far as like your going from, in the upbringing that you're talking about, your parents have education. Tell me about them, and then how did that impact your decision to go to school? Like, is what I'm really asking about, and tell me about that process.
Yeah, so or parent, I grew up with just my mom, and she did get a couple of degrees, but she got them in South America, right? So I think she had a good idea of what the value of education was and is, and kind of passed that down. Um, but had to go it alone, right? Like she didn't know what FAFSA was, she didn't know what the Common App was, she didn't know what the
Hmm.
SAT is. Um, had to figure kind of all of those out one by one, asking those same friends that were telling me about their Caribbean vacations to help me on, the English portion of the SAT. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I get tutored twice a week." I'm like, "Cool. You want to teach me what they taught you? I'll help you with math."
Nice. No, I mean, I think that, it's that grit, that is there that, I think you kind of you're showing that, right? You just kind of went out and were able to make the experience that you had. So when you were going and looking at different universities, where did UF fall on your list, and how did you decide to ultimately go there?
So again, and I don't. When I talk to people about this now, I don't think that many kids that are 17, 16 applying to college think this way, but I really just looked at it as a return on investment from that early stage. It
Wow.
was I'm staying in Florida because out of state tuition to me is just not a smart move. And from the Florida schools that are available, I mean, there's really like three options that I wanted to go to. So I applied to UCF, UF, and FSU, and that was it. So there
Yeah.
was no plan B or C. That's it. Staying in Florida, one of those three schools will do. So
Yeah. 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 And you know, same. I think that when it came to your top school was UF that one.
no, so then I looked at rankings. So I looked at what school had the best ranking for the program that I wanted to get into, and it flip flopped from computer science to pre-law, sociology.
Hmm.
And eventually, I guess my risk adverseness landed me with accounting instead of sociology for pre-law, even though I wanted to be a lawyer. And it worked out. Accounting had the UF had the best accounting program, and I think it still does in the state. And that's where I went.
And so from a young age, you're already thinking back what you just mentioned was you're thinking of your ROI from day one, looking at UF. Like, did you have any, you know, were you an entrepreneurial type kid? Did you actually, think about money a lot when you were growing up too, in that context of like, hey, I want to make sure that when I'm getting, putting in, I'm going to be getting that much back out? Like, how did your mind work?
Yeah, so I think in middle school I was selling candy. Go to like the wholesale store, BJ's or Costco, and pick up, a box of 30 Snickers, Hershey's, Butterfingers, or whatever. Those are like $12 a box, and then you'd sell them for $1. I'm like, all right, 50%. That's pretty good. 100%, whatever it is. So did that for a little bit, and then I started tutoring because instead of selling 15 candy bars, I realized tutoring is very expensive and people shell out for 15, 20, $25 an hour for some good math help. So I started doing that. I would post up in Barnes and Nobles and Oakwood Plaza when it used to be there, and just
Nice.
have like back-to-back appointments come in. Like between appointments, I'd get coffee and then be back at it. And it was really funny because, taking like AP classes, like kids from Broward College would come in and kids from Miami-Dade College would come in. And they're like, wait, you're my tutor? I was like 13, 14. Like,
So
it
good.
was great.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. I mean, again, the selling lunch, like there's little things like that in school and also tutoring is huge. And so ultimately, lead me to kind of at UF, your mindset on picking your career and then also diving into really what you're doing now. Like, tell me those experiences. Obviously, you were super involved at UF. You kind of went in with your head first and became Mr. Hall of Fame over here. I think your picture is still on one of those walls. And, you obviously were doing a lot of the stuff that I joined partially as well. I didn't get nearly as involved in the business school as you were, but we did a couple of different things together and kind of share that experience and again how that's kind of led you to doing what you're doing now. And again, you mentioned a little bit of what you studied, but kind of share a little bit more.
And this is where, people ask me if I believe in God, and I'll tell them I don't know. I'm pretty agnostic, but this is situations like this is where I think something out there is watching over me. So by happenstance, when I got to UF, a couple of friends that I grew up with also got in. So Becca's in the chat now, talking a lot, and I appreciate her support. But then one of Becca's friends that went to like St. Thomas Aquinas down here was named Megan. And, seen Megan a couple of times growing up in high school, but not a lot. And all of a sudden, Megan's joining clubs. So I'm like, hey, I should probably be doing that.
Hmm.
Megan's talking about FLA. She's the one who told me. She was like, oh yeah, there's this club for the top 100 sophomores or whatever it is. Like, you should apply. And I was like, okay, why not?
Nice.
It's like after a semester, we're taking classes, and that's really what started my journey was just good friends, right? You are the 7 people you surround yourself with. In my case, the one person I surrounded myself with. Um, so she got me on the road, and then once I got into FLA and figured that out, I was just kind of like, all right, these are my people. Like these are the people I want to be around. These are the people getting good grades. These are the people making things happen in the university, and these are people that are going to teach me a different skill set that I didn't already have.
Right.
So,
Right.
because yeah,
Yeah, totally, totally. And then, with that, so what were some of the most, people right now, I think it's an interesting conversation of we spoke about when you were in high school looking at college as an ROI, experience. And then obviously now there's a huge discussion around if universities as they are today are still going to even be in existence later down the road, you know? What are your thoughts? And do you think looking back, obviously I think we had you know, a pretty solid university experience, and we were able to get a lot more value than I'd say most students, generally speaking, because there's that dynamic. But yeah,
yeah,
like, what are your thoughts on that, and where do you see it's going, like upper, higher level education is going in the future?
it depends. I mean, honestly, it depends so much because college is an experience in and of itself. And I think what I remember from college is very little about the classes and very much about everything else.
Mm,
So, yeah, the classes were great. Yes, I have transcripts I can show you, and something resulted from it, right? Something stuck.
right.
But I remember, the trips to Ginny Springs, going out to restaurants or bars around the area, definitely homecoming parades, football games. So that aspect, I think, is so important that, if you look at kids now and what's going on with COVID, like they hate it. Like even during lockdown, even when school wasn't open, I think I had coworkers say like, yeah, my kids are back, in Tallahassee or Gainesville because their friends are there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, totally, totally. And then, do you think, have you heard of like the uncollege movements or any of those things that are going on too? Um, I think, do you see those as potential viable things? Obviously, we know nothing of like, we're not working in higher ed to really have a real thought that's like, in the industry, but from our perspective, what do you feel is the future? Like, do you think that your kids are going to get a college education?
So I think education in and of itself is always important, right? Does it have to be the traditional college route? I don't think so. I think we can definitely have education be much more modular. I don't know why I need 120 credits and why 60 of those have to be in things that I don't care about or remember about. Distinctly, I remember taking a class in um, bugs and people because it counted as a biology credit, and I needed that. Ask me anything about bugs today. I couldn't tell you. You memorized a bunch of flashcards and you regurgitated on the test, and I think that part of the college system is should be done away with.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it definitely has to change.
Would you Yeah, I know a lot of people right now are talking about potentially even going to a 2-year degree, get the AA, and then transfer to a university as being a potentially more cost-effective way to go to school, and get that education. Would you, knowing, like, thinking about that perspective, would you still go to UF and do what you're doing, and do what you did, or would you think in your high school mentality, thinking about the ROI that you're already thinking about, back then, would you have you think you would do it again the same way, or no?
Honestly, if you're only thinking about return on investment, then yes, financially and numerically and measurably, that is a smart thing to do. But if you think about the college experience and the level of rigor and the change from community college to some place like the University of Florida, then what you saved in money is going to cost you in therapy because like it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
And I'd see it. Without naming any names, while I was at UF, I worked in the advising office, and
Yeah.
I would see transfer students come in and just have to have discussions about what's different here. I had a 4.0 at the institution that I was at, and I'm missing something.
Mm.
So no, I don't think so. If you're gonna go into a challenge in school, go in there first.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't.
I think, yeah, that your time at the doing advising, I remember you in those polos. I think that's so interesting to have that perspective of really what's going on at the student level across, like, again, those types of transfers. Um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, and so UF obviously has a lot of different connections. UF was able to obviously provide you and hopefully solid education, right? And at least I can say so for myself. And then we then transferred into the professional world, right? And so tell us about that transition, and then obviously like maybe lead up to where you are today and like your professional career journey and how that's treated you.
Oh man, graduating from college was rough. So I was on the 5-year plan. So even that extra year didn't really help the transition.
You got a master's though,
Um,
right? In that 5 years.
yeah.
So yeah, I will put that
I
in
mean,
there.
okay. Yeah. I mean, it didn't. Yeah, 5-year route for a reason, not
Right.
not just because it took 5 years. But
Right. Non-engineering.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
engineering. But it felt like a cliff, right? So I don't, again, and this kind of links back to what I was saying earlier. Summers, I would play in the park. Then I dove into school, academics, involvement, whatever. Then you graduate, and there's a big gap of like, I don't know how to live life on my own without, clubs and activities and competitions. So going to working 8 hours a day to then not knowing what to do with the other 8 to 10 hours of my day, that was rough.
Mm.
Um, that was
Yeah.
really rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have an experience where, uh, did you, first off, did you also intern in places too, like pre-graduation? And, I'm not sure if you had an experience similar to this. I'll share a little bit from my experience where one of my internships, doesn't matter where it was, but I remember talking about like the Cicerones and about preview. And I was like, these people don't care at all about any of these things that us at
Hmm.
UF like coveted. We were like,
Yeah.
wow, these people are the like coolest, most impressive, facey people, and I want to be like those people. And then I was had this internship, and I was just like, oh yeah, I'm a very involved to do this, that, the next thing. And then I was just like, wow, you guys don't care about so much that I cared about as a student. Did you have an experience like that as well?
Um, so generally, yes and no. So the thing about case competitions is I wouldn't
Mm,
talk about case competitions. I talk about where I traveled to, like, oh yeah, I love to travel. I've been to Thailand and Australia and Spain and whatever. So it was kind of an easy going conversation. And then they're like, oh, why'd you go? And it was like, oh, I did a competition for the business school.
cool.
So the activity part was a side aspect, and then the travel part, kind of saved me a little bit.
So your involvement though at school, like in University of Florida, was very beneficial and transferably it transferred well to like ultimately your profession.
Yeah, I mean, serendipity, man. It just, I would not have had the opportunity to travel as much as I did on my own.
Hmm.
Very thankful to the Havner School for allowing me to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was easy to talk about because everyone talks about travel, and when you bring up major world cities, like everyone's like, oh yeah, I went to Thailand. What part did you go to? Or like, oh yeah, I've been to Australia. Did you go East Coast,
Right.
West Coast?
I
Yeah,
think so. Ultimately, it's like, people can get involved. People can go about college in a couple different ways, right? They can probably like not get involved and just like have fun and like do their own thing, which is cool. Or you can actually get involved and like really understand the university at a couple of different levels, maybe your college, right, as you did, at like very intimately. And then there's also different types of involvement from what you're saying. Like again, like you were able to get into like a really strong professional involvement route where again other routes would not have potentially led to the types of careers that you have and that other people might want as far as like a business focused career, which is
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
No, I mean it. So and even the reason why I ended up there was kind of funny. I mean, as soon as I got into UF, I went to stick to what I know. So I joined their debate club at the University of Florida. I went on one competition. Um, we got second place, and that's when I realized I was like, I topped out, right? Like that's when you get to college and you get paired up with a random person, and you're like, all right, got second place at this competition. I mean, then you have a decision of like, do you want to devote your life to it and win like nationally? And I just
Right.
didn't want to do that. I was like, I'm again ROI. I I
Yeah.
got as much out of this activity as I can. Let's go figure out something else.
Yeah. You already won states if I right as in high school, right?
Yeah,
And then so it's like you already were doing that. I guess unless you wanted to become a politician, there isn't really much more to debate.
yeah.
Like I think that's
I mean,
pretty much that. Totally. And then so, then going again, transitioning from, university into full-time role, like what was that experience? How was that application process? And then, you know, your job, like, and then your career, right? It was it a straight line, obviously, and or, what were those peaks and valleys?
come on, David. Success is a straight line. Didn't you know that?
I mean, I
Like,
know that what I
no.
just did, I was born out of the womb and now I'm doing okay myself, so
That's exactly how it went. No,
Yeah.
So another thing that those classmates that would go on Caribbean vacations and whatever else is that they're taught that I didn't have any access to is, take your child to work day for them. They'd go to a corporate setting and learn how people act in corporate America and learn how to talk politely. And, apparently saying this idea is dumb at work isn't the best way to go about something.
Yeah.
So you had to learn how to say phrases like, "Well, please walk me through your thought process. Have you considered perhaps this method, or do you know whether or not it might result in this inevitable failure?" Like, just learning how to talk corporate was a difficult one.
Interesting. There's a different kind of dialect that was you need to be able to kind of talk about things indirectly, but also show get your point across. It's definitely interesting, especially if you're in a role that has to deal with a lot of clients, I assume, where you have other people that you're trying
Uh,
to, who are paying you to do work, and you need to be able to keep them feeling good, but also guiding them. So yeah, and then now tell us more about your current situation. Like, really, what are you what is your day like, most days? How do you spend that? And then career profession wise, tell us more about how that's going.
so how do I spend my time?
Yeah.
Let's see. A lot of the time it's wake up maybe 30 minutes before I have to start working, work all day. I might step away for lunch or, take 30 minutes away from the screen. Then I'm wrapping up somewhere close to 6, 5:30, hit the gym, come back. Either I'm picking up food depending on how late I get to the gym or I'm making something. Usually it's pasta and like vegetarian meatballs lately because why not?
Yeah.
And
Nice.
lately, I think, yeah, you know about this, but I did buy a house,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that just gets
Congratulations.
whoa. Thanks. I'm a debt holder. People keep congratulating me.
You're very leveraged.
Yeah, I made a promise to pay a lot of money back. Congratulate me in 30 years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so that gets just woven into the day. So those, I mean, literally, you don't know what you don't know, and then you don't know what you need to do until someone tells you they need it right then and there.
Hmm.
So that's been interesting.
Yeah. So I take it you're generally pretty structured when it comes to a lot of, time management, and then also budget wise, we're going to get into all that shortly. But yeah, so tell us like your general, like, where are you living, and like what kind of role do you have at the company? Um, and yeah, and talk about, yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm in South Florida. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I work for Productivity. I'm a senior consultant in their business performance improvement practice, which can mean anything, right? So we can be helping you look at how to gain efficiency out of your employees. We can be looking to see how you can improve your cash collection cycle. Um, Whatever it might be that we're there for it. We might even be helping you digitize a heavily manual process, right? Just if your company is on paper and you want to get off paper and you want to be able to actually gain insights from everything that's on the paper, we can help stand it up from the ground up. Um, that's kind of what I'm doing now. And the firm as a whole really is technology consulting, risk consulting, internal audit, and it's a global firm. So
Cool.
that's where I'm working. Office is in close to Los Olas, and
Yeah.
I've been there for 5 years now. That's my first job out of college. I interned there right before I started, and it's been a good time so far.